Oh, oh my God.
There it is.
This has been, what, 75 minutes in the making?
Yeah, it was a little adventure for sure.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, whoa, I'm like taking it in for a second that this technology is actually letting me do
Yeah.
this. Okay. So people on my friends list are already joining, so that means that it did go to my page, which is awesome. So
Cool.
what I am going to do right now is I am going to share this into a few groups. Um, but Shane, if you would like to kind of let us know a little bit about you, and then we'll kind of maybe jump into who I am and where this all began.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'm Shane, and basically I've been working with Matthew for about 8 months now, super, super intensely, and yeah, it's just been a crazy, crazy journey from where I was and how I got here, and even how I found Matthew and Teal and all that stuff, and you'll get to hear all about it.
Yes. So we have been working together since the big solar eclipse that happened. It was actually the first day that we decided to work together, which obviously on an energetic day like that, I mean, miracles are bound to happen, right? And that was back in, when was that, August?
Yeah, it was like late August. It's funny, I remember that day because I remember talking to you. I don't know if that was our first session. I think it was. And you were like, "Did you get to see the eclipse?" And I said, "No, I missed it today. Wasn't having the best day." And you're like, I didn't understand all that stuff really and how it worked. But I was like, "Yeah, it can't hurt." I'm sure it's, I'm sure it's
That's
good.
so
And yeah,
good.
it's yeah. So
Awesome.
yeah, I guess that was end of August around then.
Yeah, I think it was right around that point in time. And we've worked together very closely, very intensely. Like there were a lot of months where, would you say there's between like 6 to 8, 6 to 10 sessions in the months at certain points? I mean,
Oh
some were
yeah,
like a little bit more, it
easily.
was fluctuating a little bit, but like some of them were pretty intense months, right? With like a lot of sessions. So what we're going to talk about
Oh
today
yeah.
in this video is kind of like where we've come from with all of this and kind of what the journey has looked like, right? So
Hmm.
to kind of begin, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Matthew Rosewater. I've been certified by Teal Swan in her process that she's created called the completion process, which is a modality of healing via the subconscious mind, going back to childhood wounding that still affects us in the present. I've got an awesome YouTube video on what the completion process is if you want to learn more about that. Hi, Akon. So what we want to talk about today is just kind of where this journey has taken us over the last 8 months. And we kind of have really an in-depth story to tell you guys about where Shane has come from compared to where he is now. And let me just tell you guys that it has been such a transformation to watch. It's been so huge. So we
Yeah, a
just
little
kind of
bit.
want to talk about like, yeah,
Yeah.
where you kind of found yourself before we started to work together. So we mentioned so far that we started the day of the solar eclipse. And that exact same day, I believe you said that you had a session scheduled with like a conventional therapist.
Right, yeah, I've been working with a guy. I mean, should I start from there? Do you want me to go back to like, do you want me to
Oh,
go back like a year?
whatever feels
Okay,
organically good to share. Yeah, we can definitely have you go back a year too, because I think it's going to be really fun for people to hear like your story prior to starting this work.
for sure. Yeah, so if you go back about a year ago exactly, I was just finishing up my third year at the university I was at, and I decided probably a couple of months before that I was going to be dropping out. I just realized that wasn't something I could do anymore. And that's about all I really knew. I was in a fraternity at school. I was actually the president in a fraternity at the time where I was, which just shows you how crazy a transition it was if I came from an environment like that. And yeah, just the way my life looked at that time, I was in a relationship that I had been in for about 2.5, 3 years at that point, and yeah, I was just ending school and I came back here and I eventually got a job working in a restaurant. So I kind of made the decision that I wasn't going to be coming back, but that's about all I knew at that point. And then, yeah, so that's just a little bit of background.
So let's talk about like what caused you to want to try something like the completion process versus what you were already doing.
Yeah, well, I started coming across Teal's videos probably, I don't know, January, February of last year. And that was just when my whole, I guess, awakening process or whatever you want to call it was just beginning. But then once I got the CP book and read that, that was like game over. That's like, that was when everything really changed. So I'd known about it for a while, and I'd read the book, and it was obviously life changing because that was my first introduction to just the whole idea of trauma and how that affects us on such a deep level. So those were all new concepts for me at the time, which was crazy. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'd still been seeing just a more conventional therapist at the town I was living in at the time, and it was good. It was good for me at the time, and kind of at the beginning of this whole process for me, it was just a really good place to vent and let off steam and process everything that was going on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but eventually, kind of middle end of the summer, we kind of just hit a wall with that, where we started coming up on some deep stuff, and I feel like he just kind of stopped knowing exactly what to do with me at that point, and it just got really frustrating. And yeah, so around that time, kind of more towards the end of the summer, I remember how I found you, Matthew, and I had been looking into trying to find a CP practitioner before, and I think I even messaged one and never heard back, and I was just kind of feeling, yeah, kind of scared to just go do it and take that step. But I remember at that time I was like dying in the restaurant job I was working at, and I was just like, yeah, that was getting really bad and impossible. I remember that was stressing me out a lot. And then so I'm on YouTube one day, and this video just pops up. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen it, of Matthew on stage. For me at the time, my perspective, I just see this guy on stage with Teal at some workshop, and I see the title as like insights on quitting your job or something like that. So I said, oh, okay, that's cool. And I watched it, and it was incredible. If you haven't watched it, definitely watch it because it was amazing. And yeah, it just applied to me perfectly. And then I just remember just like seeing whose channel it was, and I saw your picture. I'm like, oh, it's his personal channel. So I kind of looked around and saw some of your videos, and I saw a video of you talking about completion process. And I was like, oh shit, he's a practitioner. So I went on Teal's website, and there you were. And yeah, I think we set up a consultation a couple days later.
And then this journey began.
Yeah, and then here's the question:
So,
how did that transition affect me emotionally leaving school? Yeah, it was tough. Like at the time, it was weird because I feel like, I mean, if you told me everything that was going to happen afterwards, I would have been like, I don't know what I would have done. I'm glad I didn't know all that. I thought it was going to be a lot easier transition, and we'll go into the detail on that for sure. Um,
mhm.
it was scary for sure because I was in a relationship, like I said, for a few years, and she lived there, and that was just, me not being in school and her still being there, and my whole life was there basically, my entire friend circle and everything. So yeah, it was really tough emotionally for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So maybe we can kind of talk about is like what it looked like in the beginning, kind of progressing towards where we are now. And I remember you mentioned when you were reading the CP book that the relationship you were in didn't seem like it was going to continue after reading that book, but there was a space of denial, right? Where it wasn't like, well, I'm not going to accept that. It's like, once I read this and show it to her, then
Yeah.
everything's going to be okay.
Right. I mean, just coming into all that new information, it's so exciting. And then you kind of have that oh shit moment, or at least I did, where you're like, wait, this might affect the current relationships I have. And so that's when it stopped being as fun. But yeah, I can remember when I was reading that book, and like every like 3 times each page, I'm like just new concepts and just mind blowing stuff. So I'm like, yeah, that was crazy. But yeah, I still remember just being in such a space of fear of like what was gonna happen, because on a certain level, I kind of knew things were gonna change really drastically for me. coming into all this
Hmm.
stuff. And yeah, like I can remember reading it, thinking about like, oh, I'll show this to her, and like then she'll be on the same page, and then we'll be fine. And yeah, it was understandably because it was pretty terrifying. Yeah.
So I remember upon starting work together, there was this kind of mindset of like, this book makes a lot of sense. This is going to fix me, and that this is going to make me super happy in a short period of time, which were some expectations that were kind of had going into it, right? So what was
Yeah.
that like, and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, that's definitely how I would describe it. Like reading the book, excuse me, yeah, I mean, it was so exciting because it's like, oh, here's this awesome process and this makes so much sense and I'll use it on myself and then, I'll get to some deep stuff and I'll cry a couple times, but then in a few months it'll all be better and you know, I'll be off. So it was, yeah, that was, I guess, my expectation at the time. I really didn't know what to expect. Um, and yeah, it was definitely a little different than that for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny, just from where we were, I guess, in the first couple sessions. I mean, I was still in a place at that time where, I'd made that decision to drop out of school and all these changes were happening. But even let's say I didn't drop out of school at the time, I was still working this job. I was still, in touch with the same friends in my relationship. And like, so my life at that time kind of wouldn't have looked any differently whether I had or hadn't dropped out. So like no crazy major changes had happened at that time. And even once
Hmm.
school started, it was like, okay, I'm just not in school, but I still have my girlfriend
Yeah.
there and I'm going there like twice a week and all that stuff. So it
Yeah.
took about, yeah.
Perfect.
Uh-huh.
And then before we even kind of talk about like what this work is like, I just wanted to point out that like the completion process, in no way are we claiming at all to be like therapists or counselors or anything like that. We're not treating anything. What we're here to do is to simply guide people through a process that is natural to them when you actually go in the direction of emotions and try to figure out their causation. So what's happening during this type of work is we're actually moving in the direction of what it is that we're truly feeling and really getting to the root of where that first started in our lives. This has nothing to do, for anyone that's new to this type of work, with actual counseling or actual therapy, because it's nothing like that whatsoever. But what we're finding is that it works 1,000 times more efficiently than what conventional therapy is known to do.
Yes.
So Shane and I kind of mapped out some things that we both felt comfortable sharing relative to the work we've done together. And Shane, I want you just to kind of see where we have like, what did you find out as one of the questions on here? Would you kind of want to
Hmm.
begin talking us and walking us through some of those points to kind of let people know like what you initially discovered upon starting, and then like the direction that things had to go once you became more aware of what was really kind of going on in the internal world?
Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. So like I was saying, that's kind of where I was. And once we started working together, I was just in a place where it's like, all right, I'm ready to try something because this job is so shitty and I just have no sense of direction right now. So I remember, yeah, like our first couple sessions, it was cool. Like I remember our first one, we went through like the full process and it was, it didn't never got too intense or anything. And I guess it was more or less what I kind of saw it being. Like I had done the process on myself a couple times beforehand. So yeah, it was cool. But obviously, once I started doing this kind of work and just made the decision to go in that direction, it took, I think, like 2 weeks before the universe was like, all right, relationship, you don't need that anymore. So that's going to end. And that's when shit really hit the fan. So yeah, basically, yeah, so once I started doing this kind of stuff, it didn't take long before that relationship was just no longer a match and that gap just got too big. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when things weren't get so fun anymore because that was, I mean, I kind of saw it coming too. Like I definitely, I'm sure that was something we talked on in like the first couple sessions we had. And I remember I was like afraid of ending it myself and realizing it had to happen, but it literally just got to a point where I don't even remember exactly how it got there, but we both just like realized this isn't really working. So yeah, that happened. And then I remember we actually had a session like that night, like the night my
Mm-hmm.
girlfriend and I broke up, and that totally went in like an unexpected direction. I'm like coming on here, I'm a wreck, like not even knowing what just happened. And then the session ended in like this crazy like laughing fit for me because I was having this ridiculous visualization.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember
Do you want
that,
to tell
yeah,
them
but
about that?
yeah. Well, so I guess for
You
people
don't
who
have to if you
haven't,
don't want to.
no, I will. It's really funny. So, when you're like meeting, or I guess for people who haven't done the process, you basically create a safe haven for yourself or like a safe space to go to when you're like doing the final integration with that child aspect of you or whatever it is. So I was doing that and basically just trying to like meet the child's needs. So I remember like the 2-year-old me or whatever it was wanted like Barney. So we're like, okay, here's Barney. But for some reason in my mind, it was just like this really weird, like, I don't even know how to describe it. I don't know. It was just like a really like non-PC, like kind of edgy version of Barney that was making me laugh hysterically. The way he was just talking and stuff. It sounds weird, but it was just, for both of us, it was hilarious at the time. So,
Oh yeah,
yeah. It's funny
it
once
was
like
good.
yeah. It's funny when you
It's
let
like
that
you go
child,
through like
so
the worst pain and torment, and then this is what you get to have as a result is like something really good and fun.
yeah.
Sometimes.
And then it's like, I remember my girlfriend FaceTiming me after that because, it's not like, bye, see you. We're still processing at that point. And I'm like, just got off the call
Right.
and I have like tears in my eyes. And she's like, what's so funny? I'm like, so that kind of
If
went
only
as
you knew.
expected. Yeah. Yeah. But, so that's kind of what it was immediately after. But yeah, slowly but surely, that was obviously really tough for me, losing that relationship of 3 years. And this wasn't a girl who I was wanting to say see you goodbye, like see you never. It was a really awesome relationship actually, and unfortunately that gap between us just got too big with the changes I ended up going through. So yeah, that hit me pretty hard, and that was kind of the catalyst for when things really started going fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll say. So for those of us that are familiar with tarot, it's kind of like we were coming upon the tower card, so to speak, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like everything that you've known to be must now crumble. But there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times where we kind of know that's going to happen and we're kind of in that space of like anticipation, but because we're aware that it might happen, we're going to do everything we can to hold on to the tower to make sure that it doesn't fall down, right? So I feel like we kind of ran into that a little bit because in the beginning, which is so understandable, and I'm sure the case for so many people, is that there's just so much numbness that surrounds that, that you don't actually want to go into the vulnerability or the pain behind what it would actually be like for that to crumble.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you sharing that basically everything that you had built that on, that foundation was on authenticity.
Yeah,
So
I mean
because it
that's
was inauthentic, it was just kind of like, okay, now that you're realizing the importance and your desire for authenticity, that what was built upon the inauthenticity is now crumbling, kind of like that tower card scenario.
yeah, and I remember you literally pulled that card probably not long after. Maybe it was the same session or one of like the first ones after that ended up happening. I remember my initial reaction was like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, what do you mean? Like, what else has to fall? I just ended my relationship and all this stuff. But yeah, I got the message loud and clear later
Mm-hmm.
on. And yeah, like you were saying,
Heck yeah.
just, yeah, I mean, I guess I really didn't realize that at the time. And it took a few months there of really, really, some not fun experiences and emotions coming up to realize that, yeah, everything had been built on, I guess you could call it like a lofty foundation. And yeah, but it took me a while to see that. So when it was happening, it was pretty scary to say the
Absolutely.
least. Yeah.
Yeah. So that entered like a whole new transition and phase of the work that we did together. And I know that this kind of leads into where you talked about, like what your routine would look like at this point, like what
Mm-hmm.
life looked like in the aftermath of this tower crumbling.
Yeah.
Did you kind of want to jump into that stuff that we wrote?
Yeah, for sure. Like, well, yeah, I mean, once that happened, and she, my whole experience at school and with all my friends there, like, she was totally a part of that. So once that went away, I really had no desire to keep talking to those friends and or just stay in touch. Like, yeah. And that's when I really started isolating myself and started having that stuff really come up, the isolation trauma and everything. So yeah, I mean, for a few months there, it got to a point where I was just in this routine where I would, I was sleeping in till 12, 1 in the afternoon, sometimes later. And that's just when I was awake. I would probably stay in bed for a few hours later. My mom's a teacher, so her coming home at, 4 o'clock was sometimes what got me to jump out of bed, just so, you know, she didn't have to worry or anything like that. And this was like right in the middle of winter, so I had, my 2 hours of sunlight. Like, I remember there's one day where I went and picked my sister up from work, and I was like, this is really weird. What's going on? And I said, oh yeah, because it's light out and I'm outside. Like, that's how crazy it got, where I was not, yeah, for sure. And just having this perspective looking back on it now, it's crazy it really was just like a day-to-day kind of thing. If I really hit me where I was, it would have been, I mean, it did, but
Oh,
yeah.
totally. And it's so understandable that like when something massive happens like that, like there's such a period where you have to process truly what's going on, what you're feeling, to truly be able to move through it. So what was happening here was just kind of a natural organic result of just really dealing with something that was very difficult to deal with. And
Yeah.
you were transitioning into more of a spiritual conscious mindset, which was not something that you felt you had in common with the people around you. I remember we had shared that part about the connection you had was like if you were able to muster up the courage to go to the grocery store
Yeah. That
to
was the
get
best I got
kombucha.
some days. Or just go for a walk at like, 11:30 at night, because it felt like, I mean, it might have always been like the middle of the day for me at that point. I was going to bed with the
Yeah.
sun coming up most days. So yeah, I mean, it was just a really tough space, because at that point, like, everything that I mean, just everything in my life basically went away. And it got to a point where I was like, why the fuck did I want this? Like, why is this something like I made happen? What, like, this is all this like spirituality shit has done for me, has just taken everything away from my life. I don't even know, like, everything I used to like conceptualize of myself as a person and identify with was gone. And it was, yeah, it was an awful, awful feeling for sure.
Oh
That's
yeah.
for,
And for a lot of us that might relate to this, if you follow Teal Swan's work, she made this beautiful video called The Ketchup Effect, which I really feel like applies in this situation. So what that really means is like when you shift so much as a person because you're doing this type of work, you're creating a bigger vibrational gap between you sometimes and the other people around you. And when they're not kind of working to get on the same page and commit to still being with you during those transitions, it makes things really hard because you do feel that distance, you do feel that gap between people. And I mean, connection is a basic human need. So when we feel like that's at risk or being threatened, that's very difficult to contend with.
mm-hmm.
So it really results sometimes, especially when you don't have the people around you that understand the things that you believe in now, or the things that you're working through, or the things that you're feeling. Obviously, we still live in the emotional dark age, so it's not really safe to share how we feel with a lot of people around us. So it's an entirely different dynamic when our life shifts in that way, especially when it's just kind of like the universe is pulling and sucking out all the things that are no longer serving you in that way, but it's not a comfortable process usually.
No, to say the least, it's definitely not. But and I mean, I think it'll vary for everyone. Some people, I mean, like we said, for me, and I just wasn't aware of it at the time. My life had just been built on such a lofty foundation, and I just had absolutely no clue who I truly was. And I was so used to my whole life being able to, become this person to gain acceptance, or, to accentuate different parts of myself, or to put on a different mask, and to gain acceptance that way. And it's like, once I started shedding those walls and masks, it was like, I mean, it literally did feel like I was on the edge of death every day. And I mean, I'm not like, I wouldn't say I was actively in that space of like wanting to, but it does feel like you're dying in a way, just because all that stuff that you learned that had to keep you safe, and that you needed to have connection your whole life, basically, at least for me. And obviously my case is a little more extreme.
Hmm.
When that, when you realize on one level that's no longer serving you, but then there's all those parts that have to catch up that literally depended on that for your survival. So I would say that's what this whole journey's been. And that was when I was in the middle of that, that was definitely the scariest part of it for sure.
Absolutely. So we can kind of talk about like what happened after that. So now that we're kind of sitting in this aftermath of, all the old things that you identified with and knew to be true and the people around you began to shift and we continued to work through that. I remember at one point you were like, oh my God, it's like the floodgates are opening up and so many things are changing. Like our dynamic even in session was changing in terms of like emotional vulnerability. What would you say began to shift and change the more that you went into these things?
Yeah, I mean, I know Teal said this before, and kind of like you just said, I think when you're starting out with this work, it takes a certain amount of time to just get past the trauma of even being able to feel your emotions and to feel the stuff that's really buried in there. I feel like for a lot of us, that's like the first layer. And then, yeah, it just got to a point a couple months in where all the floodgates opened at once. And those were some of like the fucking scariest days of my life. And I know Matthew, I think at that point I was like literally sending you like hourly messages, freaking out, and you were incredible. Just like, I remember, you're there like, yeah, this is, just supporting me, and like even started sending me like memes at one point just to, yeah, it got pretty crazy.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I
that's,
related to a lot of what you're going through as well. Like, it made perfect sense the way that you were reacting to those particular things. And sometimes, like, when we actually let ourselves go to those deeper, more painful places, like, we're experiencing emotions on such a more powerful level because we're kind of releasing the resistance to feeling them, which isn't something that we're usually used to doing. So it can feel, really intense or like something awful has happened, which I remember that kind of led to that whole period where there were such big releases, but they were
yes.
consistent and strong and frequent. So, I remember there was this whole period of you being like, fuck spirituality, it's ruined my
Mhm.
life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, I mean, when it was literally like one day, it all just opened up. And yeah, I was literally a wreck, like living honestly on a minute to minute basis at that time. My mind couldn't go any, like, even conceptualize of anything other than that. And
Mhm.
yeah. And then I remember like we had a session one of those nights, and I was in such a space of like, I don't even have like a word for whatever I was feeling at the time. But I remember right when we, connected on Skype, like that second, I just lost it all and I just burst into tears, and I was not expecting that to happen at all. But yeah, that just shows, and like that hadn't happened before either with us, you know, that was
Yeah, and that's
definitely
the
the
thing I think
beginning.
that's really important to hear. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this type of work can look so many number of ways that I think we kind of get used to like how we expect a session is supposed to go or supposed to look. And it can start off with something like he just mentioned where you jump on the Skype call and you're already in your emotions, feeling it. Like there's not even a word that can come out. We're ready to process, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
totally one way it can look. But there have also been sessions where you would come on in a super good feeling state with like not even a clue what you wanted to explore. But just by virtue of getting, to talking and like really diving deep, even doing parts work, we would realize that there were parts of you that really did need our attention. And then we would get some of like the biggest emotional releases slash integrations by virtue of entering a session, like not even knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of them I just came on. I was like, okay, so these five things happened in the last couple of days. Let's just start talking and we'll see where it goes. And yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, I feel like for us, I mean, we kind of went through periods of more like intense stuff and less intense, but I'd say overall, like maybe half the time did we actually go in and like go do actual process work. The other half was just presence and processing and just talking, just like we are right now,
Mm-hmm. And
which is
that's another
definitely,
thing too. It's like
yeah.
with shadow work, it can look many ways too.
Mm-hmm.
So shadow work is really just anything that you're doing that's helping you to realize something that you didn't know before about yourself. So what we're essentially doing is we're using different modalities, not always in a process work format, to be able to learn what's really taking place in the subconscious mind. And there are so many ways to do that, but like some of the easiest ways to do that is literally just by talking about what you're struggling with and then having somebody receive that and be fully present unconditionally with you during it. And would you say that that can be equally as powerful as some of the process work that we've done in terms of like actual completion process formats?
Oh, I see them right on the same level for sure. It just depends what you need at that time, but I would say from a certain space, that's definitely the best way to go sometimes. And yeah, we've had
Totally. And I think it's just about being open and organic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, we've had some crazy stuff for sure. What were you gonna say about that?
No, I was just saying like some of the craziest shifts I've experienced have been just from us talking things out and my mind being blown like 3 times in the same session.
Yeah, those are some good ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, what was kind of happening to paint the picture in the timeline of like where we were was now these emotions were, there's 2 things happening, right? So one thing is like they're being experienced in their actual like raw state, like unfiltered, going into it willingly, like we're not resisting some of these emotions. So what that would really lead to was a lot of like inability to regulate those strong emotions. And the reason, and what that means is like they just continue to go on and on and on and on and on, and there's like nothing to contain them in. So that's something that a lot of us missed out on in childhood. It's a developmental trauma where you literally didn't have an emotional container. So like when you were experiencing those, you know, really powerful emotions, but you didn't have anybody to really go to help contain them for you, it's hard to learn how to regulate those emotions or what to do with them. So that was our opportunity to really go and heal a bit of that as well, to offer you that container to be able to express them in, because of course that's going to feel awful. It's going to feel like something's gone horribly wrong, because no matter what you do with these emotions, like they're just not feeling good. They're not going anywhere. Like nothing's changing, nothing's shifting. You're stuck in how you feel. So that can sometimes be a whole other layer of healing that we don't even realize needs to happen until something shows up that shows us that it needs to happen. So once we kind of had that emotional container, I think it began to feel a bit better and like more natural and easier and comfortable to be in some of those emotions. But when you really tap into how you feel, you're also going to learn that there might be some emotions that are not okay to feel. So when you're trying to experience something that's coming up so strongly, but it's been ingrained within you through any number of means, it can be through like societal programming, trauma from your parents growing up telling you that it wasn't okay to feel certain emotions. I know anger was a big one for us that would come up during a lot of things. And there were so many things trying to trigger you into those emotions of anger, but it wasn't coming up. So what was happening was it was either like complete dissociation whenever that anger would try to come up, or just all kinds of other things would show up in the way of that. So what we learned, I think, next was that we had to do something with that.
Right. Well, there was one big shift before that I think we missed. Do you want to talk about that quick too? Because there was one big thing. Yeah. So yeah, no, basically just where we were, I had all those emotions come up, and then we kind of, you know, just again, at that time, it would have been cruel, honestly, to try and do any process work with that. So just getting that consistent presence and being able to sort through that and just make even some sense of what was going on was really big. And, you know, then I feel like that's when we really started moving quickly. And yeah, it was tough because I had all these emotions coming up, and some days were really intense and some days weren't, but it still just felt in a sense like I was living just like in jail almost, or I don't know how to explain it, just kind of in, like locked in chains. And so I remember we had this one session, and we hadn't worked because, you know, this was right after Teal's, I think, workshop in Long Beach, and you had been at that, and I was actually at a family event in LA. So we probably hadn't spoken for like a good week and a half, which for us at that time, it might as well have been like 3 months. And, you know, I remember some big things that come up for me on that. So I remember coming home, and I don't remember what it was that day. Something maybe about my girlfriend or just whatever it was. There was some intense emotion coming up, and I remember going into it, and it just wasn't going smoothly, I guess. Or it just got to a point where it was just very clear that I wasn't going to be able to move through this process today. And I was getting a little frustrated and being like, man, why can't this just work? I just want to feel better and all that stuff. And, but it eventually just got to a point where I remember you said to me, you said, so at this point, what do you think would be the best thing to do? Do we want to keep trying, or do we want to leave it here today? And at first I was just so resistant to like the idea of leaving it there and not going forward and fixing myself basically. But I realized, yeah, this isn't going to work today. So I said, okay, we're just going to leave it here. And so, you know, I came back to the room, opened my eyes, and, you know, just got acclimated to my surroundings again. And I remember saying, like, I actually felt kind of good. Like the first little hint, like the first 2 minutes. And then I was like, no, wait, that feels really good. What just happened? And I remember you said to me, you looked right at me and you said, like, you realize like that part of you is jumping for joy right now. And what followed there was like the craziest paradigm shift I've ever experienced. In like the next hour, it was, I mean, you did a video on it, so maybe some people watched it, but I remember it was literally just us grinning like idiots, staring at each other for like 10 minutes at a time. And then me realizing like, oh, that was intense. Even just thinking about it again. That was crazy.
Oh yeah, it was huge. You learned that like you had permission to just be how you were.
Yeah. I mean, it was in that moment that part of me, it's like every single cell in my body was saying to me, like, don't you fucking dare try to change a single thing about me right now. And once I gave her that permission, it was like everything opened up at that point. And it got from, you know, just after that, like, oh man, that felt really good, to me realizing like this can apply to my entire life. Like, I don't need to do anything that doesn't feel good. Holy shit. It's like, I remember it even got to, and yeah, just like I said, those chains I've been living in, I finally, it was the most freeing thing ever, just realizing like all shoulds and shouldn'ts just went out the window. And I was like, I could go get shit-faced tomorrow if I want to. I could go text my girlfriend 12 times if I wanted to and like be super crazy. And I remember saying to you, like, don't worry, I won't. And you were just like, I'm not worried. I'm loving this. Keep going again. Yeah, it was just, yeah, it was, yeah, that was pretty amazing. I would say that was like the single biggest thing that happened, or at least one of them, through our entire time working together. And it was just the first time I had the concept of doing things that feel good just because they feel good.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's huge. I did make a video. If you guys wanted to check it out on the Planet Ascension YouTube channel, I think the video is called My Greatest CP Success Story. And what was so beautiful about that, it's like when you approach this work at the beginning, so much of us want to do this type of thing because we want to fix what's wrong with us. But you can only do this type of work for so long, and then you're going to hit a wall where you can't do that anymore. You're going to get to a part of your being that's like, nothing's wrong with me. Like, why do you keep trying to fix me? Like, what are you doing? So Shane hit that wall.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like such a simple thing.
So what happens there is that freedom.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like a simple thing. And the thing is, like, we can talk about it all the live long day, but like, until you actually experience that shift in your body, oh my God.
Yeah, I had never felt sensations like that. It was crazy. And yeah, I just remember like looking around and being like, hold on, like I don't feel like I have to cope right now, for the first time in I don't remember how long.
Oh, that is so good.
Yeah.
But it was like all these past experiences and integrations were necessary because they led to this moment being possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember you were saying like, this is what Cloud9 feels like.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I'd say that was like the first really, really big turning point we took in this whole journey. And yeah, I'd say for a few days I was just like, oh, everything's awesome. This is like the greatest thing ever. Like, couldn't even believe how awesome that was. And it was, like, it really was that amazing. Mm-hmm. But then there's every other part of me now that's not in alignment with this shift I just had.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, all right, you experienced that. Now let's have some more fun. Time to catch up.
Yeah. So whatever wasn't on board with this new paradigm shift essentially decided it needed to make itself known. So anything that's in resistance to you needing to be different than how you are is now going to surface, right?
Yes.
So
So I
that kind
guess,
of led to like bigger shifts within each session because they were all essentially leading up to resonating in this new truth and this new paradigm shift that you achieved.
yeah, I mean, at that point, like every single time we would work together, it would just, I would come out so different than when we got in. And sometimes it was fun and sometimes it was like, my life is over now. But every time it was like something crazy. I don't even know how to explain it. There just was not a
Oh
single
yeah.
session where,
Did you freeze? Oh, there you are.
yeah, just for a second. I think we're back now.
We're back.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, I mean, all that stuff, like we said, just started coming up again, and yeah, just more intense stuff and more intense shifts just kept happening
Mm-hmm.
regularly. And I guess over the next few months, that's what kind of got us to that next point you were touching on with the anger.
Mm-hmm. So like, okay, so to kind of talk about that one more level, it's like when you make shifts like this, the reason this work is so amazing and how it changes your life is when you go back and you work with these pieces of us or these parts of us that are in pain or in trauma, what you're doing is you're shifting your point of attraction. So to keep it a brief explanation, we live in a law of attraction based universe, and most of us tend to think that it's only what we're consciously aware of and focused on that we get in our reality around us. But there's this whole other level that is also a point of attraction, which is your subconscious, right? So when you begin to shift what's going on in there to shine light into the shadow, what you're doing is you're also changing what you're a match to in your reality by virtue of doing this type of inner work. So I remember that by virtue of this particular paradigm shift, it led you to be a match to the desire to want to do the metaphysical anatomy training with Vet Rose.
Yeah.
And then on the road to like making that a possibility, even more things were coming up that might have been in the way of that. So I think
Right.
that's where we kind of like lead into where we had to basically like take the cork out of the bottle of anger for you, essentially
Yeah.
was what was next.
Yeah. Well, I guess just to quickly sum up what was happening at that time, it's just things that were coming up that were being mirrored very clearly in my physical reality at the time. Moving back home to school, I mean, from being away at school was just a big thing. And at that time, I quit my job and I wasn't in school. And you can imagine how my parent, one of my parents, the parent I was living with, might have seen that. So it made for a not very fun experience, to say the least, at home for a little while. And especially when I'm going through all this emotional work, like, for me, this was if you're talking about working hard and putting in effort for something, like I've never had to, I mean, this was by far the most I've worked hard in a suffering sense or whatever for anything by a mile. It's not even close. And then, but when someone else is telling you that you're kind of lazy and that you're not doing anything, you can imagine it's a little bit frustrating. So
Oh yeah.
that's what was kind of coming up for me, was like first anger, and then I think rage would be a more appropriate way to describe it. Um, and just for me personally, that is like that has been like the single emotion that I've just was taught at a certain point was absolutely not okay. Like absolutely not okay under no circumstances. And like if you knew me before, like I was just like a massive, massive people pleaser, and I was always very shy and timid and just really trying to not get in anyone's way or take up any space, basically. So you can imagine how just deeply buried all that anger and rage was. So, but with the situation I was in, it was starting to come up. And yeah, it took a little while. I mean, at that time I was realizing, okay, like something's got to give here. I got to do something. and make a change.
Mm-hmm.
So, you had told me about Yvette's book, Metaphysical Anatomy, a few months before, and I got it just for fun. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's like this crazy, basically, encyclopedia of all like 700 medical conditions, and it talks about the emotional, psychosomatic root cause behind all of them. It's absolutely mind-blowing. So I loved the book, and what I didn't know, what you told me around that time, was that Yvette actually had her own healing modality. She taught kind of that went along with the book, kind of like Teal does, and she actually certified people to do that. So, and it was in Los Angeles, and it was coming up, and I had family in LA, and it was coming up in the next month or so. So eventually I decided that was something I was going to do, and which was great. But like you said,
And
it was
then
once.
what?
So once I kind of made that decision, the universe is like, awesome, good job. We have 1 month. Anything that is in the way of you staying a match to going to this training, we're going to have fun with it this next month here. So, and boy, did we have fun with it.
We had so much fun.
Yeah.
I mean, in the beginning, absolutely not. But now that it's like we've gone over that hump, we can definitely talk about it that way. But honestly, it was not fun.
No, it wasn't. So basically, to just sum it up really quick, it got to this point where there was just no way to hold this. Like, it was killing me. Like, I could not function. This rage inside of me was just coming up, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I remember, like, at first it just took us going back to the memory where I realized it's not okay to feel that. And we had a really
beautiful thing. Yeah, we get to do that. Maybe just to explain to people that don't know, this is even an option with the completion process, but not only can you go back to the first time that you felt something and deal with the root cause, but you can change the wording of the question. So what you get to do instead is you get to ask the question, when was the first time that I learned it wasn't okay to feel this feeling? So what you're doing is you're going back to when that first started for you to learn that, like, I cannot express this anger, for example. And you're going to be taken back to that scenario in order to find resolution with it. So I think it was like a very young child aspect of you that came up during doing that.
Yeah, I was like, I remember in the memory, I was like a baby in like a crate or something. And yeah, that was pretty intense. And I can remember like in that session, going back in that memory, like it's the craziest thing. You can go back and to like the second you realize in your head, I can never be loved in this state the way I am right now. And it's crazy how much more sense your life makes when you come upon a realization like that. Like, anyone can tell you.
Let that sink in for them. Like, that's literally what you were taught as a kid. If you're angry, no one will love you. Let's just take a second to like let that sink in for you guys. Like, how many other people is this the reality for? Oh, I'm sure there's millions.
And it doesn't just have to be anger. It can be any emotion. I think for a lot of us it is anger,
Totally.
but it can be
anything.
anything.
This is just one example of a suppressed emotion.
Yeah. So,
So what did we learn after that experience?
Well, that was just crazy because you can be told so many times like thoughts create reality and stuff, but you really get a deeper understanding of that once you like see how true that is for you, and your life will make a lot more sense after that. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So after that, I remember we had one more where it's like I had people home and stuff, but that was big because I literally was the first time I started expressing anything. I remember I just had my eyes closed and I was in this feeling, and something just made me want to start punching the fucking couch. So I started punching it, and I don't remember what happened, and then I kind of hit a little wall there.
Seeping through the cracks. The anger was like, okay, we haven't been expressed in a really long time, so we're just gonna like come up a little bit at a time. Let's see what he does with us.
But that was a big fucking deal for us because like that was that was massive. And I remember even me at the time, once I realized like, okay, I have people sleeping upstairs, like I don't feel ready to just start screaming, but like this was big. And then from there, the rest of the session was us being like, okay, we've gotten to this point. I'm scheduling a session. I'm getting the fucking house to myself. And like, we are letting this all out. Like we knew that going in, like this is what's going to happen. And that
Oh, that just makes
probably,
me feel so good because, like, look at his level of dedication to how he feels. Look how he's prioritizing his own healing over everything else. Like, he literally knew with all of his being that he was going to manifest that situation where he had the house to himself, which was a very rare opportunity. This doesn't happen very often.
mhm,
But he made it happen because he was like, I'm doing this and I care enough about myself to make this happen. And boom, there it was.
yeah. So that probably, I mean, it's not like I couldn't have waited like a week from then to then. It was maybe like 2 days later, I feel like we ended up having that, like 3 days max or something. And obviously the in
Freaking
between,
fast
I'm just,
manifestation.
oh, hell yeah. No, like that was happening. We both decided that, like that second it was happening soon. Um, so I can remember specifically like just taking a walk outside like before we were about to have this session. And it was really cold. I live in Toronto for anyone who doesn't know, so it's cold here, or it was at the time. And I have like this little mask I use when I'm biking, but it's just the kind of one where like it goes around, it covers your ears, and you can like use it to cover up to your nose or your mouth or whatever, or just wear it around your face. Um, so I'm like wearing that, covering my whole face, literally just walking like cursing under, like not even under my breath, like how no, I probably looked crazy. I've like just had my hands in my pocket, I'm all bundled up, and I'm just like, yeah, letting off steam on the sidewalk there. So that's pretty funny now looking back. And yeah, you know, we connected on Skype, and I remember you did that thing where you told me like, look at your life right now and play it forward.
Oh,
And
this
yeah,
was so good, you guys. Like, if you ever want to get into your own suppressed stuff around like the way that your life currently is, and you want to access like the true deep vulnerability underneath it, you guys need to try Teal's Play It Forward process. It's actually a free video on her YouTube where essentially you're painting the picture of what life looks like right now and the parts of it that you're not okay with. And then, as if it were to never change, you're going to be going in different increments in the future. So I think we even started off like, what is it going to look like a week from now if
yeah.
things don't change?
And then a month, and then a
In a
year,
month?
and then I think we went to 5 years. And what would your life
That's it.
look like 5 years? And I remember I just said like, I would not fucking be here. And at that point,
The volcano erupted.
I'm like physically like shaking violently at this point, and I'm just like, part of me realizes what's about to happen. I'm scared to just because like I realize I'm about to explode. And I remember you say to me, you're just like, all right, just try hitting the couch a couple times and see what happens. And I remember, so I do that, and then from your perspective, you're flying across the room at that point. I just,
Oh my God. Do we to paint the
yeah,
picture
yeah, go,
of
yeah,
what this looks
yeah. I
like?
think
Okay.
it's
So I'm sitting here, right? I'm on Skype. I have my little headphones in. We're doing this coaching session together. And I'm feeling like empathically like the anticipation almost like quakes, right? Like earthquakes. I can feel the pressure building within him through doing the play it forward process. And I knew that by the time we got to the 5 year mark that like, oh my God, here we go. Like this is where we've been trying to get to, because what we decided before the session was like the suppression of this anger is what's holding him back from where he's wanting to go and to be, right? So we were definitely willing to look at this. And this is where we first had our entry point into like full on going into it, was through that play it forward process. So the second that he began to allow himself to feel how he truly felt, I saw the image of him flying away. It was funny because it almost happened the way I perceived it in like Matrix, like slow motion style. Like it was just like because what had
yeah,
happened was the laptop, in his fit of rage that was coming through him, flung the laptop to the other side of the room. But I was able to hear what was going on, and still like he could hear me.
yeah.
So I
So
remember like just like letting you go. And what did I say? I can't even remember. I was just
all
kind
right,
of like,
I remember, yeah. So
do you
basically,
remember?
what happened is, so yeah, I start hitting the couch, and then I just like I like went full Hulk. Like I don't even know what was happening. I like knocked my laptop off the table it was sitting on. I flip the table over. I take a cushion out. Like I broke the fuck out of that table. It was amazing. And like while I was doing it, I was like so in it. But then there's like that little observer like self watching me, being like, "Dude, you're breaking this fucking table right now. Holy shit!" Like, so it was a crazy, crazy thing. And yeah, I'm just like, I take like one of the legs off the table and I'm like smashing it and just letting out these primal screams from like the pit of my fucking stomach. Like I never knew I was capable. I've never made
Oh yeah, it's
noises
like
like
a
that
fucking
before.
dinosaur roaring, and I'm over there in the
Yeah,
corner with a great view of the ceiling,
yeah. So that's
listening, and I'm
exactly.
just like, I can't see you, but you're doing great.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, here's that. And I was like, and then yeah, that was probably the funniest part. It's like I'm here destroying my basement, and I hear like very faintly like, okay, I can't, like, you're like really trying to maintain control there. You're like trying to be really reassuring. You're like, okay, I can't see you right now, but just know that I'm right here and you're doing awesome. And I'm like, okay.
There's this
And
voice
then,
from the corner on the floor.
yeah. And then, so, I get all that out of me, all that just rage and anger. And then the release you have after that is just so, oh my God. It's like the kind of thing where like you're crying and then you're like you have no control of your body. And then you just let out these like wails basically. And that was beautiful. It was.
Oh
That
yeah,
was
like
really
this
awesome.
had a stranglehold on you ever since a young age. So these parts of you that are in anger and in rage have been holding on to it for so long that it's been so bottled up.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not how normal anger is usually going to be expressed, because it's never supposed to get to the point where it's suppressed
No.
like that for someone, you know what I mean? So like if for people that are watching this and think this is the only way you need to express anger is to destroy tables in your basement, no, that's not true. It just, this is how it played out for us specifically, and there's no right or wrong way with it. But the reason it did come to that is because how suppressed and stuffed down it was for what, 20 years?
Yeah, 21. Whenever it happened, yeah. But
Yeah. So how would you describe that release that you felt afterwards? Like what was life like after that? Because I think a lot of us feel if we really go in the direction of those types of emotions that we're just going to be stuck in them and we're going to be this like raging bitch for the rest of our lives if we actually like let ourselves feel it.
yeah, I mean, 15, 20 minutes after what I just described, I'm like sitting at my kitchen still on Skype with Matthew making a smoothie. And like I'm like thinking, all I'm thinking is like, now I have to clean the fucking basement. That sucks. But I'm just like, all right, I want to make a smoothie now. So it was just, yeah, it's not like, exactly. It's not like you're stuck with it. And it was, I can't describe how freeing that felt. Just the weight off my shoulders, like physically, how like freeing that was to let go of that. And I remember even that,
And the
like it
thing
kind
is
of,
too, like you have somebody with you. Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly. And I remember it comes in waves. Like it wasn't just that's it and you're done forever. Like it came in waves, and I didn't have to go break another table. But there are times that night and throughout the next few days, I would just have to go downstairs and scream into a pillow for a few minutes. But I would say that was like the next thing, just because when you're taught an emotion is so not okay, it had such a strong stranglehold on me. So being able to finally experience that and allow myself to move through that changed everything. Yeah.
It's incredible. So we can kind of talk about like, first of all, that was a huge deal, and that like freed up so many things within you, but also shifted your point of attraction dramatically. And then you're able to access even deeper layers underneath that we didn't know existed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So what happened after this kind of experience for you? How did life change, or what was coming up next?
well, I'd love to say that, oh, that was such a big release and I had a few weeks and it was like a vacation, but no. A lot of us who are familiar with this emotional work and with Teal's work understands that anger is usually a layer of protection to protect you from feelings like powerlessness and helplessness, and those true, just probably some of the lowest vibrational states that exist in this reality. And it's funny, like I even remember, even before having that release, being like, or like right after. I mean, still just processing everything, not even getting to just being like, oh shit. Because I knew that I might be in for some more fun. So yeah, I mean, it was right after that I remember we were doing like a parts work, and it was like visualization. There's just literally like this part of me that was like chained up in like this dungeon, and we went through the entire thing, and basically met that part's needs. And then something happened, and I was like, wait, I don't know like what happened. I don't know where this part went. And you brought up the idea. You're like, is it possible that he got all his needs met, and that was all he needed? And I was like, oh yeah. And what I kind of saw what it felt like was literally the part was like, all right, thanks. I'm gonna go live my life now. See ya. Just literally running away, which is great. That's what you wanted, but it was almost like I was trying to use this part of me and like use this process to fix like its powerlessness or through that. So like I didn't have to really experience it. But yeah, once that happened, I just saw myself sitting there in that visualization, just feeling the full force of that powerlessness and all those emotions. And then, eventually we came out of the visualization. I was just sitting there with my eyes closed, like, oh, and I can't, like, the only way I can explain it, it's just like it's like the heaviest, like, feeling emotion you can, like, I don't know. It's just like, I don't even know how, I don't really have words to explain it, but yeah. It was really intense, and for sure.
I remember just that need that needed to be met was like, I'm going to be with you here no matter what. And that was huge because that was kind of like we mentioned earlier, that big paradigm shift. That's what it was. So now we can use that as a gift and offer it to these other parts that haven't received it.
Exactly. And that was the big shift that happened that day. Was like when you're experiencing an emotion that literally hits you like a truck like that, there's no, like, it's very clear that if I try and get out of this, it's going to swallow me like quicksand.
Yes.
It was in that moment that I realized like it no longer serves me to try and set any sort of agenda for how I'm feeling or for trying to, like, I have to let go of this attachment that I have to be feeling good or feeling a certain way all the time, because it just
can't go in just to get out.
Yeah, exactly. You can't go into your emotions.
That's the difference. Like, the meaning of this work begins to change. Like, once you've hit that wall that we've talked about, where it's like, I don't want to be fixed, nothing needs to change about me, I just need you to be here with me. Once you kind of climb over that wall into what's on the other side of it, what you're going to run into is a whole different meaning for why you're even going inward in the first place. So it's now to accept what is rather than to need to fix something or to make it different or to change it. I mean, maybe things will change naturally as a result of receiving that presence, that acceptance, right? But that's
that can't be the goal going in, right?
Meaning. Totally. The agenda is no longer the same.
Yeah. It's super counterintuitive, but it's funny. Like, once you let go of that, that's when things actually start to feel better, but you can't like do that to make it feel better. So you just have to, I mean, those emotions just kind of force you to be in that space anyways and to surrender to them.
Big time. And it's important to know too, like, if that's not where you're at and you're hearing this and you're feeling bad for not being at that point, nothing's gone wrong. Nothing's wrong with you because of that. This is something that could only happen organically because we went into, being authentic with how we felt, which was the need to fix things and to look into things in that way. And until you naturally and organically come to that shift of consciousness, like, you just need to be doing it that way. And that's completely okay. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that at all. It's just that this is something that we tend to find, a pattern after doing this work for X amount of time, however long it takes each person, is that you're going to find that wall. And you're going to be like, wait a minute, like, this isn't the same anymore that it used to be. Like, what the heck is going on here? And then that just happens organically and genuinely. So we can't force ourselves by mentalizing a shift in consciousness like that. we have to actually be experiencing it emotionally and in the body in that way in order to actually be in this new space. And the way that we do that is we go in time and time again, and we build that bond with our internal world. We're increasing that level of trust that we have with ourselves to be able to get to that point. So that's the difference between really like knowing and mentalizing of like how it should or could look versus admitting and accepting your current reality where you actually are, and then moving forward with that. And then perhaps that'll be something that you encounter. But if you do or you don't, like nothing's wrong with you. There's no good, there's no bad. This is just the organic path that it took for us.
Yeah, I mean, Teal actually, I think, recently posted an amazing video of that, and that's actually what got me to fully make that shift and just process all of that. I think it was from one of her recent online workshops. I think it was with Lynn, and she was doing a demonstration where she had her go into her powerlessness. And I think she described it as like, you know, how she was kind of trying to fight it. And Teal literally said to her, it's like, good, I want you to realize you're never like escaping this. Like, this is always how it's going to be. Like, I think she had just described herself in like I don't know if it was a jail cell or something like this. And Teal made it very clear. He said, like, I want you to realize you're never getting out of here. And then eventually she was like, oh, this actually feels better. I was just resisting the shit out of it before, which is keeping me in there.
Yes.
And then
it's like, it's just counterintuitive to like let yourself do that, because it's like a survival mechanism not to, but what comes out of doing it is so profound.
Yeah. And so basically where they ended up, and I mean, just watching that almost allowed me to completely make that shift. And this happened probably a good full month or a few weeks after we actually had that session, was just how she explained it. She said, like, yeah, it's like, this is where you are anyways, so you can try and get out of that jail cell and you can do something, because why not? But if you don't get out, like, you're where you were anyways. And if something works, then great. But we're not going to do something. It's different. It's not like I have to get out of here, because that's the exact thing keeping you right where you are.
It's just getting out of the denial that you are there.
Right. So,
so good. And I think like that particular video that you're talking about taught so many people, like, it's okay to be vulnerable in that way and to share that with people. And that, like, we're changing the paradigms where people that see other people being vulnerable, I think in an old world way of thinking, like, that shows like weakness or whatever. But like what we're really evolving into now as a species and in a consciousness is like, the more vulnerable you are, the closer you get to be with that person, the more of them that you get to know.
Yeah. And
I think that's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, it takes getting to that point when you realize, like, holy shit, I can be who I am. I can be who I came here to be. I don't have to hide that, and I don't need to lose love for that. I don't need to be abandoned because of that. In fact, I get to receive all the love in the world for that, just for being me. And that's what everything.
And that's a process to get to that point. Like, because we can even say, like, when we started working together, when you would show vulnerability or emotion, did it look the same in the beginning versus how it does now?
No, I was like crying into like a blanket. Not even, like, I wouldn't even let you see my face. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge shift. And now it's normal, and like, I think it's beautiful to witness, and I'm more than happy to want to be there during those moments. So what we get to do, especially when you work with somebody in this type of setting, is like, you're getting the proof over and over again with each session that, like, this person's staying here while I feel this way. And it's like rewriting all of your DNA in your body to changing things to like, wow, I actually get to feel how I feel and not lose people. And that shifts the way that you react and what you're able to show people, and how like open you get to be with them in terms of your vulnerability, and watch them still stay there and not change or not judge, and still offer you that same unconditional love and presence and support.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then I think like, it's amazing what it can do.
Just what a little bit of emotional validation and presence, how that can change your entire life.
Yeah. So we kind of talked about like how all these things came up leading up to this course and this metaphysical anatomy training. So did you actually get to go?
I did. Yeah. I was around the middle of March, and I flew out to LA with my bicycle. I packed up my road bike, and I had some plans for that afterwards to take a little ride down to San Diego, because that's something I've been wanting to do, is go on a little mini bike tour. So I first flew out to LA, and I had the course. It was 5 days, and yeah, like even the first day, I remember like going back to my Airbnb after and just feeling it's like, holy shit, I'm experiencing like the world again. This is terrifying. This is awful. Like I have like my journal thing on my computer from that night. It's crazy. I was just like, why did I do this? But slowly but surely, it ended up being one of the most awesome experiences I've had so far. And I met some really cool people, and Yvette was amazing. And I got this certification, which is, it's funny when like you drop out of school and then less than a year later, you have something in front of you that means like so much more than any degree would have meant to me. So it's just funny.
And you had
totally
connection with like-minded
exactly.
people.
Yeah.
Oh my
How
God.
about that?
So good.
Yeah. So that was great. And so then I went on my little bike tour. And at that point, oh yeah, and then like at the training too, I just had like the biggest shift and like release at like the very end. It was funny. Yvette was like, she's like, you didn't think you were getting out of here without like looking at that stuff, right? And I was like, no. So it was that was really big. And so yeah, just experiencing that connection thing. And then I decided, I stayed with my grandparents for a few days, which is always interesting. And then yeah, I started riding down the coast to San Diego. It was about 5 riding days. Probably took me about a week and a bit total. Just I had a few breaks in between. But that was awesome. It was good, and it got lonely at times, and that was my biggest teacher of the whole trip, I think. Because I remember I got to San Diego, and I'm walking along the beach in Ocean Beach, and it doesn't matter what I do anymore. It doesn't matter. I can go ride my bike along the ocean every day for 5 hours. I could do all this stuff, um, but it no longer matters if other people aren't part of the equation.
Yes.
And I realized in that moment, like, what my biggest priority had to be was connection. And I remember in that moment, I'm walking along the beach, and I remember just saying to myself mentally, like, okay, I'm going to walk down to like those rocks, and then I'm going to come back. And then something just hit me where it's like, no, turn around right now. So I'm just like, okay, I'll just do that. I walk around, start walking the other way, and 10, 15 seconds later, like no more than that, there's like this lady drawing this thing in the sand. I don't know what it was, but it's like pendulum path, I think she called it. And we just instantly like smiled at each other, and I was just asking her about it, and she was telling me how it's like, it's great for healing, and do you want to walk through it? And I did, and it turned into like this half-hour conversation. I got to tell her everything about my journey and leading up to here and just everything, and it ended in like this big hug with this like random lady I just met along the beach 30 seconds after making the decision that this is my big priority in life, and look how it mirrored immediately. And I remember after that, I was just like, oh my God. That was just one of those like what the fuck moments when you realize like all this law of attraction and stuff we man, like it's like actually real. Because
Oh
sometimes,
yeah.
yeah. And it was at that moment that I realized, okay, if these are my priorities, I mean, I got to get back to Toronto. I might as well stop in Chicago this weekend for the workshop. Like, of course I'm going to at this
Not just
point.
any workshop, a Teal Swan workshop.
Yes. And that was a couple weekends ago. And in doing that, I met some of the most wonderful people. And I think a few of them are watching this right now and finally experienced the opposite to all that pain and isolation and everything I've been experiencing in the past months and really experiencing my entire life. Just maybe hadn't been aware of it. on a certain level. And
Yes.
yeah,
Oh, it's huge. Like it's the byproduct of all of the work and transformation that you've allowed yourself to have. It all led up to this point where you had yet another life is all about like these big realizations. And then from that point of perspective, like what do we move in the direction of next, right? So we're just always in
right.
this moving energy of like what perspective are we trying to obtain, and then from this new point of perspective, what's next. So that big realization of connection was huge. And the thing is, like, you wanted to let yourself have it. You're able to actually go for it. You made the decision. You like, I'm going, like I'm investing in myself to go to Chicago to go to this workshop, and this is happening. Where before, would you say that you knew you needed connection, but were you willing to go out and get it before?
No, and I would say that was one of the biggest things I've realized is that, you know, with this kind of work and just especially in this community, like someone focuses on changing your thoughts, which is massive. Don't get me wrong. Like you can't really go anywhere. I mean, that's a huge step, but we still live in a reality where taking physical action steps is one of the ways to make drastic changes to your reality. And it's like in doing that, those three things, going to LA and then choosing to go to Chicago especially, was like the cherry on top. It's like all of that internal work we did so intensely is finally catching up, or has
Oh, big
finally
time. So
caught
you're
up.
getting the fruits of all this labor essentially, right? Like you're seeing like what actually gets to be a result of doing this work now, finally, right? It's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
like look at all the stuff that we did and all the things that we encountered and all the stuff that gets to happen now because of it. Like you've been freed from those particular gel cells. You get to actually go out and experience what it's like to have this and then retain it in your life afterwards. So like Shane and I, after having this, you know, wild 8-month journey together, which has been so life-changing for both of us, you know,
Yeah.
we got to meet there. And it's just like this full circle moment, you know, it's like we know
That
exactly
was
where we
amazing.
started from to get to this point and how big that was.
I remember
And
kind of
things will
coming up.
continue to get that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. I remember I kind of saw you before you saw me, and I just from behind was like, hello. And you had to do like a double take, and you were like, whoa, my God. And then just,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
And
Yeah,
then,
it just
oh,
all the feels hit you in those moments and it's like we got here. We made it. We're here. And this is just the beginning.
so crazy. And now I'm on
So
the
good.
couch talking to you.
I know. This is just mind blowing. And it's like there's just so many amazing things in store for you. You got that certification, you now have connection in your life. I mean, what would you say is now changed going back home from that experience? What's different for you now versus before?
Oh God, I don't even know how to answer that. Like, um, it's just such like I had no idea how different I was going to be coming back than when I left. And it's like once you experience that stuff you were starving for, there's no other way to live your life after that. So I don't know where it's
No
going to
other
take
life
me.
makes sense at that point.
No. So it's a
But
little
you
bit
now
of
have
them
that
kind of,
that realization.
yes. So I get to go on from there, and other stuff's going to come up, and I'm going to learn new things, and it's going to be awesome.
That is amazing. Oh, thank you so much for being like open and wanting to share this story.
Yeah, this
And I
was
think this
awesome.
is just like so important. Yeah, because like there's not much out there that shows like what long-term, you know, work with the completion process and shadow work can do for you. And I think like so many of us still hold that expectation of like, okay, we'll just do like 2 to 5 sessions and you know that's going to be awesome and fun and I'm going to be living this like amazing good feeling dream life with nothing negative ever happening to me ever again because I healed all my trauma. And it's like there's a lot that can be accomplished and improvement that can be found with doing a couple sessions here and there. But what would you say the difference is now, having it been 8 months in working together versus what you were experiencing in the beginning in terms of shifts?
I would say now there's no finish line. There's no finish line I have to get to. Teal puts it the best. I really can't say it any better about healing. The better it gets, the better it gets. And there's going to be
Yes.
peaks and valleys. But I mean, the one thing that's different now that allows me to feel optimistic about doing this kind of work daily is that, you know, I realize it's not something that has to isolate you. It's through that vulnerability that you get to experience the greatest connection you could ever imagine.
Oh my gosh, yes. That is amazing.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of wrap it up, but I am just so grateful to be able to share this story and for you, Shane, to come on here and just be able to bear witness to like what this stuff is capable of and like how that actually has transformed everything from point A to point B. We talk a lot about like closing these big vibrational gaps, and now we can actually say like what it feels like to have experienced some of them closing and you actually meeting up with what it is you've been wanting.
Yes. It is. There are no words for that. It's crazy.
No, there's none. And it's priceless. Like, it's amazing. It's just so beautiful to witness it. And like, this is really like the cutting edge of what healing truly is and what it truly can look like and what's actually possible. So it's my wish for anyone that watches this to kind of get an idea of like, this is possible for you too. Anybody can achieve this. And in closing, to kind of talk about like what Shane and I, you know, offer and things like that, what I'm really passionate about right now, especially after having like several clients that are more long-term, to be able to witness this with and to witness their transformation and to talk about their stories and to see, you know, these new heights in their life that they get to be living in because of this work. I decided that I'm really going to be funneling in all of my passion into wanting to work with people on longer term basis, as opposed to like, let's just do a session here and there. And like, well, why is my life not changing in a huge, you know, super dramatic way? So I have now on my website, for anybody that feels a call to check it out, on planetascension.com, you can find monthly mentorships with me where you're going to have set number of sessions per month. We're going to get through what we call all of the layers of the onion. So that's kind of the way that healing tends to take place. We kind of identify like what one of our core issues might be, but on our journey to that core, we're like, oh, but this layer is here first. Then we get through that one. It's like, oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. So what this gives us the opportunity to do is to make sure that we're tackling everything on all levels relative to the situations and circumstances that we find ourselves in, so that we can actually achieve these long-term things, because they tend to be sometimes more complex or more multi-layered than we realize. So we might realize that we want to tackle, let's just say, for example, because I teach this a lot, right, is quitting your job and manifesting your own business and teaching yourself like, you know, how to actually use the law of attraction and things like that. But you might find like 50 things that come up along the way of you trying to actually get there. So this gives us the opportunity to address everything. It gives us the opportunity to have accountability, gives you the opportunity to have a regular support system so that you get to share all of the different things that are going on in your weeks. And that way none of this stuff is just sitting bottled up or not heard or not seen or not felt into. And I mean, even just from that alone, as Shane already talked about, is wildly transformative. And then what we do is we take for the really hard stuff and the deeper stuff, process work sessions where we're going to go in and find the root cause of these things and basically rewrite your history up until the present, so that we can actually experience those freedoms and actually line up with those desires and actually close those vibrational gaps. So
right. And
thank
just
you so much, Shane.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Yeah. And were you going to say something? It looked like
no,
really big.
no, I was just gonna just kind of off what you were saying, like when you make that commitment, like a long-term commitment to yourself, and you go in with the intention that I'm going to close this gap from where I am to where I want to be, it's like it will happen. It doesn't matter how big that gap was. Mine was particularly large, which is why our experience was the way it was. But for anyone, it doesn't matter. It will happen.
It will happen. Thank you so much. I'm here for any of you guys that feel like that support can be helpful. You can reach out to me anytime, Matthew Rosewater on all the social media, or planetascension.com. And for anyone that wants to reach Shane or has any questions about anything that he does or has been through, I believe we can go ahead and have you add him on Facebook as well and send a message.
Yes, that'd be perfect right now. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for everyone that joined us here live. And then we will probably be sharing this around. I'm going to try to put this on my YouTube. We just want to reach as many people as possible with this message, because we want people to know what's possible. Is essentially the message that we're here to send you. It's like, there's nothing that we can't get you through. So on that note, I love all of you guys too that are commenting. Thank you so much for being here. And we will be around. So if you have any questions for us that you want to leave in the comments, if you're watching this as a recording rather than with us live, feel free to let us know that you're here and that you're watching, and that we will get back to you. And we will talk to you all so soon. All right. Well, take care, everybody. We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.